Hello and welcome. I'm Lorianne Lumby with Authentic Freedom Academy, and this is our Friday spiritual service. Today is Friday, August 28th, and our theme today is harnessing our power. And so before we begin and launch into today's lesson and spiritual practice, I'm going to invite you to close your eyes so that we could take a few moments to arrive here and to prepare ourselves for this gathering. So I invite you to close your eyes and to take a moment to connect with the rhythm of your breathing, to be conscious of each breath as you draw it in, and each breath as you give it release. Each breath as you draw it in, and each breath as you give it release. Allowing that conscious awareness of the rhythm of your breathing to ease you into this present moment. Letting go of busyness, any worries or fretfulness. Letting go of your to-do list. And just allowing yourself to be here now. And as you allow yourself to arrive here, I invite you to draw your focus with your mind and also in your mind's eye into the center of your being. Taking a moment to identify where the center of your being resides within you. That center of your being is your true nature. It is your wholeness. It is your connection with self. It is your connection with, it is where you are one with that which some call God. You will know that center of your being because when you arrive there, you will feel a sense of calm, of peacefulness, of inner safety, And as you connect with that place of inner being, allow yourself to rest there for a few moments in that place of wholeness, peace, contentment, and safety. And as you remain connected in that space of inner being, I invite you to listen to these words from Scripture. And this is from Matthew's Gospel, chapter 7. Jesus said, "Everyone who listens to these words of mine and acts on them will be like a wise man who built his house on rock. The rain fell, the floods came, and the winds blew and buffeted the house. But it did not collapse. It had been set solidly on rock. But everyone who listens to these words of mine but does not act on them will be like a fool who built his house on sand. The rain fell, the floods came, and the winds blew and buffeted the house, and it collapsed and was completely destroyed." I'm going to invite you as we move into the lesson for today to remember that place of inner being and where you located that within yourself. For we are going to be returning to that as our meditation in just a few minutes. So hang on to that piece. As I mentioned in the opening, the theme for today is harnessing our power. And I'm going to talk about what that means. And we are going to take time to engage in a practice that we can turn to again and again and again to stay in that place, remain in that place, or return to that place of our own inner power. The power that I'm referring to is our connection with God. It's our connection with our true self, our soul, the source of our living and breathing and being. It's the source of our awareness. It's the source of peace and comfort. It is the source of love and compassion It is the source of joy. It is out of that deep inner being that our purpose unfolds and emerges. It is out of that inner being where connections are drawn to us and formed. This inner power is what our world has spent centuries trying to convince us that we don't have. Trying to convince us that power comes from outside of us, that power is to be possessed and coveted and grasped onto. Our world has tried to tell us that the source of our knowledge is outside of us. The source of our knowing is outside of us. That the source of love is outside of us, and it's something that we have to earn or can be taken away. We live in a world that tells us that our value is outside of us, and that our value is defined in some sort of strange material measure, like how much money we make, what our position in society might be, whether we're educated or not, what kind of job we have, how hard we work, are we contributing to society? For I don't know how long the world has tried to convince us that we do not have power, and that power is something that we have to seek for outside of us. We have also been told, criticized, condemned, demonized for every way in which we have connected with and tried to utilize our true inner being. Those moments of intuitive insight where we have tried to communicate what we know and have been told, you can't know that. How do you know that? Or the times when we have felt that something was unsafe or intending to cause harm, and we were told we were crazy. Or the times that we foresaw something coming to pass and were told we couldn't know that, or we were crazy, or we'd lost our minds. The times we have tried to communicate the truth that arises out of that wellspring of inner being. And when we've been told we were liars or hypocrites or blasphemers or heretics because of the truth that we were trying to express. One way of thinking about this deep inner being is that it is our God nature. It is the divinity that has come to be in the world through us, uniquely through us. It's the divine within us that gives us life, that guides us, that compels us on our path, that causes us to feel restless, bored, unsatisfied when we are somewhere away from the path of our truth. This is our true nature, and it is who we are meant to be. And through this deep wellspring of inner power is how we are meant to live. And this is not a fairy tale, because throughout our human history, there have been women and men that have connected with that deep wellspring of inner power and have lived it to its fullness. Jesus and Mary Magdalene, the Buddha, Moses, Muhammad, many of the saints and holy people that have gone before us, and those that have even lived within this century, like Anandamayi Ma or Amma, if you're familiar with her work. It is the purpose of our human experience to connect with and harness and live from that deep wellspring. And yet we live in a world that every single moment of every single day is trying to keep us from that connection. So the first step in harnessing our power is to recognize that it's there, which is why I guided us through that meditation in the beginning of today's gathering. That energy is there, it's palpable. And when we give ourselves permission to concentrate on that space within us, not only are we able to feel that energy, but we are able to strengthen and deepen our connection with it. And the more we deepen that connection, the more we're able to live from that space instead of from the space that our society wants us to live from, which is distracted, restless, anxious, afraid, always looking outside of ourselves for that which will make us feel safe or whole or at peace. But as we have moved on our life journey, we have come to realize that these external things they never satisfy in any sort of enduring way. Any satisfaction is temporary. It is also an illusion. Having a Big Mac because we're craving that Big Mac does not really satisfy the craving, because the craving is not really about a Big Mac. It's about the craving for that wellspring of spirit and power that is within us. But in a capitalistic culture, we're taught that everything else but that inner connection is the source of our fulfillment and satisfaction. Money, power, fame, possessions, food, clothing, you name it. All you have to do is watch advertising to see all the ways in which our culture wants us to not be connected within, but instead to be looking without. And it is that external gaze, that external distraction that is keeping us from our inner power. This is especially true as we are moving through this profound evolution in the human experience, where we are witnessing the literal death of the world as we have known it. We are seeing institutions crumbling, imploding upon themselves, and literally dissolving in front of our eyes. And it is mass chaos. That is trying to draw us away from that place of inner peace, that place of inner power. So the first step is acknowledging that the power is there. The second step is taking a look at what are all the things in the world, in my life, that are keeping me from that connection or drawing me away from that connection. Are we involved in behaviors or habits that are keeping us from that connection, that instead are drawing us deeper and deeper and deeper into a state of anxiety, restlessness, anger, frustration, fear? As the world gets louder in its death throes and the symptoms of a dying world get louder and more pronounced, the distractions will be even greater. So now is the time to make a choice. Do we want to be caught up in that anxiety, that fear, that panic? Or do we want to cultivate and deepen that connection with our own inner being? And this is the secret of that connection that the world out there definitely doesn't want us to know. The more we cast our gaze on that inner place of connection, our inner being, our union with God, with each other, and with ourselves, and with all of creation, the more we cast our gaze to that inner space, the more we become a magnet for what we need to survive and thrive on this plane. And that is so contrary to what we've been taught in the material world. The material world says effort equals support. You have to do something to get what you need. And is there doing in that connection with being? Absolutely. Where else did the greatest books in the history of humanity come from? They came from people's connection with that inner self. Where did the great art and music masterpieces come from? They came from that connection to inner self. The more we cultivate that inner self connection, the more we draw to ourselves what we need to fulfill our life's purpose. Whether that be people, community. I'm continually amazed at how people find this community, because it's not because I followed an SEO formula or that any of the marketing advice I'd been given actually produced results, or that all of the experts that I've hired, after doing what they told me, it produced results. Had nothing to do with any of that. It all had to do with some other energetic force that connected with those that would find what I have to share in the world meaningful or supportive in some way. It had nothing to do with what I did except being Lori and allowing the gifts that I have within me to come forward and put those gifts out there. The more we cultivate that inner beingness and connect with it and keep our gaze here, disciplining ourselves from the distractions that happen around us, the more our life unfolds gently, effortlessly, and with some measure of ease. Now, that doesn't mean there's not going to be struggle. It doesn't mean there aren't going to be those moments of despair and devastation. Doesn't mean there won't be suffering or loss. But when we connect and keep our gaze on that inner space, the resources that we need to support ourselves when we move through the difficult times in our human experience, those resources come out of us. Maybe we're guided to a resource that can help give us guidance. Maybe an insight arrives. An insight arrives that helps us to see things in a different way. Maybe a person reaches out to us at the exact right time in the exact right way. And I'm going to give you an example of this so you know that it's real. This was a couple years ago. I had been contacted out of the blue by a headhunter, someone that was looking to recruit people for a particular job. For whatever reason, they found me on the internet, don't ask me how, and reached out to me and said, hey, we've got this job. Here's the job description. If you're interested, apply. On paper, the job was perfect. On paper, I would have actually made a salary and had insurance and benefits. Oh my God, what would that be like? On paper, everything looked great. But there was this thing in the back of my head that had some questions. What about this? What about that? Are you sure that's what you're supposed to be doing? And I decided to ignore that voice and proceeded with trying to put together a resume, a cover letter, all of that fun stuff. And as I was freaking out inside of myself, nervous, anxious, filled with trepidation, I got a phone call out of the blue from a friend from grad school that I hadn't talked to in 5 years. We had connected through Facebook, but not anything other than sharing Facebook posts here and there. And she calls me and says, I felt like I was supposed to call you today. Something's going on. Now, this is someone I hadn't talked to in 5 years. And I'm like, you're right. I have this job that I'm trying to apply for, blah, blah, blah. This friend happens to be an astrologer, which I didn't know. And she says, tell me your birthday information. She plugs in all my birthday information, pulls up my chart in 14 seconds, and she says, oh yeah, you can't take this job. And I'm like, okay, tell me why. Well, because it says right here on your chart, you're a new age Aquarian entrepreneur. New age Aquarian entrepreneur. You can't work for somebody else. And I was like, you're right. And then I had complete peace. Now, I wasn't looking for someone to call me out of the blue to talk me out of a job that on some level I knew I didn't really want. I hadn't talked to this person in 5 years. We kind of really barely knew each other than we were students together in a grad school program. And here's this phone call out of the blue, like the voice of God saying, no, you can't take this job. That's what happens when and as we connect with that wellspring of inner being. What we need shows up. And at the place where we are in this human evolution, it is critical that we disconnect from the systems that tell us we don't have power and connect with that system of power that is within us. Number one, it's how we're going to make it through this transition. It's how we're going to survive the death of the world as we know it. It's also how we're going to receive the resources that we need to fulfill our part of being part of the new, or bringing forth the new. So I encourage you to, in your own way, shape, or form, dedicate yourself to that practice of connecting with your inner power. And with that, we're going to spend a few moments in meditation cultivating that connection. So I invite you again to return to closing your eyes and to draw your vision, your awareness, your energy, your consciousness to that place of inner being. Casting your gaze and all of your attention inward. And when you make that connection, remaining in that connection until I invite you to come out of it. Now I invite you to open your eyes and to remain in that connection as well as you can as you become aware of the space around you. This practice is what Jesus was talking about when he talked about the builder who built on solid ground. This is the solid ground practice, the rock. The rock that brings us to that place of inner connection where we feel safe, at peace, and whole. This is also what Jesus talked about when he taught his disciples how to pray. Go to your inner room and close the door. This is our inner room. It's where we connect with our divine self, our divine source, and where we find our connection with one another.